Hello, darlings! Welcome back to Lum Squad, a podcast hosted by me, Lum Squad, and Andrew A.C. Yoshimura, devoted to the wonderful and wacky world of Rumiko Takahashi's Urusei Yatsura. Now, we went back on a high-inspected hiatus again last summer, but hey, this is the second attempt to release the Urusei Yatsura in the 90s, also unceremoniously stopped too. So, as they say, third time's a charm, and at least we've come back for our third try much faster than they did. You didn't have to wait 20 years or 6 months. But, much like this is where the releases of the series, we're dedicated to resuming regular episodes of this podcast on a monthly schedule, mostly on the last Friday of every month, but at the very least by the last day of every month. And we have a couple episodes already recorded, and we've got a recording schedule mapped out, and with more manga coming out and Discotek bringing over the movies out later this year, there's gonna be plenty to talk about. Our plans for the next couple episodes are gonna involve catching back up on the manga since we last talked about it. Our previous episode was us covering basically the first 5 volumes of the new Viz release, and on today's episode we are going to be covering Volume 6, the first volume featuring newly translated Urusei Yatsura chapters from Viz in over 20 years. Yeah, on this discussion you're going to hear us discuss the first appearances of prominent characters like Kotatsu Neko, Ryoko, Mendou, and of course the recurring conflict between Tomobiki students and their teachers, which really goes into full swing in this volume, as well as some other classic stories playing around with Japanese history and alien biology. And afterward, we're going to dig into one of AC's favorite hobbies. We're also going to do a lot of Urusei Yatsura related topics on this show, in addition to covering the manga. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about anime cell collecting. AC explains the history of collecting cells, and what the Urusei Yatsura cell market is like in particular, and some of his favorite gets and most regretful misses over the years. AC's tips and tricks of the trade will be sure to help you get a start on building an awesome anime cell collection of your very own. So, grab some tasty taiyaki and curl up in your comfiest kotatsu and chill out listening to the return of your favorite Urusei Yatsura podcast, another lively episode of #Lum Squad. Hello, darlings! Welcome back to Lum Squad, a podcast devoted to the wonderful wacky world of Rumiko Takahashi's Urusei Yatsura. I'm Lum Squad.
And I'm Andrew A.C. Yoshimura.
And today we are covering Urusei Yatsura Volume 6, and also we're going to talk a little bit about
animation cell collecting.
Yeah, animation cell collecting. And kind of the way to go about collecting cool cells for yourself.
I'll go through some of the. It's kind of, this one's particularly my idea and specialty. It's a theme very close to my heart, this one, so I might take the lead on that one. But it will be full of how to actually get your hands on Urusei Yatsura cells and how to actually display them as well.
Nice, I'm excited to hear it. But do we want to begin with our Volume 6 discussion? Because this is a really big volume for a couple of reasons. I think foremost of which is that with this volume, Viz Media is finally publishing chapters of Urusei Yatsura they had not previously translated into English before for the first time in 20 years.
That's right. It was a long time coming. This is part of their signature series, so they say they're going to do the whole thing. And they got as far as 11 before, Volume 11, effectively?
Yeah, Volume 11. This book comprises Volumes 11 and 12. And the last time they released a volume of Urusei Yatsura back in the 90s was November 1998. So, yeah, it has been 21 and a half years to this point to get new chapters of Urusei Yatsura in English. And we've got 12 new chapters, basically, in this volume, because they didn't even do every chapter in Volume 11 originally. They skipped the last one with the Forget the Year party. Probably
yeah, I remember that as well, actually, because it's a very odd chapter, that one.
It is really crazy, very steeped in Japanese co-op culture references, so maybe that's why they skipped it, but also it goes some wild places. And I think this volume, if you haven't already been convinced, really shows just how ludicrous and zany and wild this series can get in a way that is really different from the extremes that you'll find in Takashi's other comedies, like Ranma and Rinne. Like Urusei Yatsura, it goes in all sorts of crazy, unpredictable directions, just pure, unbridled insanity and creativity, and that's why I love it so much.
It is a bit of a transformative volume, this one, because it does kind of change a couple of things about Urusei Yatsura. And I think Takahashi was just kind of throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And I think she kind of found something in this volume that she kind of went, oh yeah, I think I'm going to change a couple of things up a bit, which I think was very wise on her part, actually.
I think so. Do we want to talk about kind of the biggest change and traditional element that is presented in this volume, and that is kind of the focus on Tomobiki High as a place where the characters all congregate?
Yeah, and this is pretty important because before then, although they had gone to school and stuff happened at school, they were often outside, like at Ataru's house, or, we were following Mendou around, or we were, following Ataru trying to pick up chicks and all that sort of thing. But in this one, it really focuses on the classroom and even more specifically, the teachers.
Yes, this is a really critical volume because it introduces the conflict between students and teachers, the adverse relationship they have, the antagonistic relationship between them. And you have several chapters.
Class 2-4.
Oh yeah, our main character's class. And there are several chapters in this volume that is specifically about the students rebelling against the teachers, specifically Onsen Mark, and just the conflict between the teachers and the students and how they don't get along, and trying to enforce rules upon them, breaking the rules, everything landed in chaos and no one learning a damn thing.
That's one of the reasons I love Urusei Yatsura. It's very Looney Tunes.
Oh, yeah.
In a lot of the way it's presented and written and drawn is that it kind of resets back to zero. And sometimes there is some continuity there. And not everything's tossed out, but a lot of the time, like Ataru, there's no way that a normal human would survive the stuff that he goes through in like a single chapter, let alone 12 of them.
Oh yeah, it's all cartoon logic, especially considering how many times characters are zapped or burned, or there's a really great chapter where the students are refusing to speak in Onsen Mark's class because Onsen has made this policy: if anyone speaks during class, they're going to have to do summer school classes. So they're refusing to speak this whole time, but Ten's coming in, he's trying to get revenge on people for picking on him, and he is annoying the hell out of everyone. He's picking fights, he's blowing up bombs in the classroom, blowing people up, and they refuse to talk, and it's just real awesome chaos there.
It is great. Like, he actually uses a grenade, like a live grenade. He tosses it, and they toss it in the corner, and like half the classroom blows up.
Onsen Mark steps on a landmine. So great.
Where does he get this stuff from?
I don't know. He's a very resourceful little kid ordering stuff from space without any adult supervision. He got that Catch Me Love Ball thing, which was defective, and he gets all sorts of weird contraptions that cause all sorts of mischief.
So let's start with Chapter 1, Adverse Effects. What I like about this is that it breaks the fourth wall.
Yes, I absolutely love this title page.
In the very first panel, like, just on the title page.
Yes,
They're telling him to get out of bed, and Shinobu's going, aren't you going to be in the manga? He goes, you guys get it started, I'll turn up later.
Yeah, I just love how meta Urusei Yatsura, the manga, gets how Takashi will have the characters acknowledge that they are characters in a manga and talk to each other with that knowledge. Like, we talked about it in a previous volume, the chapter where everyone's competing to be the main character, and that's kind of the stuff I love. I love this fourth wall break and stuff. Not taking the world too seriously, everyone just having fun with the medium of the manga. There's a really great visual gag later on in this volume. During that chapter I mentioned, where Ten is annoying everyone and they're trying not to speak, like, Ten does this really silly face to provoke a reaction out of the student, and we see, like, the text inside this kid's mouth, like, trying to come out, and then people, like, come and push his mouth down together and push the sound effect of back inside his mouth so it doesn't come out. Such a great visual gag.
It only works in manga as well, and Japanese people love onomatopoeic sounds. Like, the sounds, so much of the Japanese language is just onomatopoeic sounds language. And it's just fantastic the way that it plays such a big role in a lot of manga, to the point where some people just get tired of trying to translate all of the sounds, and they just have a little glossary at the back saying, on this page it went ba 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 ba, or go 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 go, or something like that. Because people, like, who do lettering, especially, like, fan translators, are just getting tired of having to white it all out or block it all out and then put the English stuff in.
Oh, yeah.
So for this one, Sakura is trying to make a love potion. It goes wrong, and she makes a lying potion instead, which is because they were both next to each other in the index.
Yeah,
and
the original joke here is that love is ski and lying is usotsuki.
So, that's right, usotsuki.
Yeah, and they did a good job of... Yeah. And they did a good job of, like, translating that. You know, it is kind of reasonable to assume that love and lying would be next to each other in this index because they're both words that begin with the letter L.
Yeah, I think that was a happy accident in this particular case. Like, they didn't have to force it too much, which was good.
Yeah, they're not, like, homonyms like in the original Japanese, but, like, it worked out and still in a really funny way that carried over in the translation.
I love how gullible Ataru is. It's, like, Lum tries to force him to eat. He won't eat it and just goes, Sakura made it, and he just grabs it and eats it immediately.
Yeah, she knows how to get him. I really like that. I like the playfulness Lum employs here. In a later chapter, when everyone is trying to eat out during lunch and the teachers are trying to stop them, at the last restaurant they go to, Ataru is saying, I only come here to see you. And Lum has ordered this okonomiyaki with, like, hot chili peppers or whatever, and the cook was commenting, that's a strange order, you have strange taste. But the reason why she ordered that was so she could stuff it in Ataru's mouth, so it would be burned and he would run out screaming. It was such a great timed gag, so resourceful of Lum, I love it. But this chapter, specifically this one with the lying potion, I really think there's some great gags in here. My favorite is when Ataru encounters his mom and he tells her, "I'm not your real son, Mom!" And Ataru's mom is, like, shocked at this for a moment, but then Ataru goes on with the lie, saying that, my real mom and dad begged you to care for me instead before they passed away. And obviously she would have remembered that, so she slowly kind of understands what's up, something's weird with him, and very perceptively, she comments, perhaps it's something he ate. She knows what's up.
She knows, and you really see in a lot of these chapters just how much Ataru is like his mother.
Yeah.
Those, like, obviously his bad luck and his attitude problem comes from her. Like, his dad is the innocent party and probably the only normal character in all of Urusei Yatsura, who just kind of wants to sit by himself, have his sake and read his newspaper, and doesn't want anything to do with anything all the wackiness that's going on. But his mum, she's a real piece of work.
Oh yeah, there's some real solidarity between Ataru and his mom. Later on in the chapter that introduces Kotatsu Neko, like, Ataru's mom does care that Ataru is not able to come downstairs for dinner, but also, even more specifically, she asks him, hey, if you and your dad get a divorce? Will you live with me? Like,
and it was just for that one thing that his dad did to Sakura. But the end of this is great because Ataru's just basically being Ataru, just lying even more than he normally does.
Mm-hmm.
But the best thing about this chapter is at the very end, Ataru turns to camera and just said, "Now, have I ever hit on other women? Never." So he's actually looking at the audience and pointing to himself. And he's got his arm halfway out of the panel as well, like he's leaning on it. Another, like, fourth wall breaking joke, which I love.
Absolutely. Just a great coda to not only this running concept of Ataru lying and telling such an obvious, lie at the end, at the very contrast to the core of his character, but also continuing the runner of this being quite a meta chapter and characters, like, not only addressing each other as fellow comic book characters, but also addressing the audience. Really, really good.
The other great thing about this is just how Shinobu was saying, how awful, I was going to give this to Mendou. And then Cherry just goes, great idea. And Lum goes, sounds fun, let's do it.
Yeah.
she loves messing with people.
I know. That's so great. Lum just loves getting into chaotic mischief.
I think it's just her version of fun. She's with Ataru because he's fun. Like, stuff happens around him.
Yeah, I mean, especially in this volume, there's all sorts of craziness that happens.
So the next chapter is Urgent Prayers, which is basically Ataru is failing, which he is wont to do. So his mother gives him a charm, which is it's
a good luck charm.
It is a good luck charm. These are very popular in Japan. You often buy them from Jingo, shrines and temples.
Mm-hmm.
And they have lots of these, like they're a little piece of fabric with something printed on them, and there are many different types. There's good luck for studying, there's good luck for family, good luck for health, there's traffic safety ones as well that you put in your car. They have one for pretty much every situation.
The one Ataru's mom specifically gives Ataru is a Dazaifu, which is a reference to Sugawara no Michizane, the god of learning.
That's right.
Shows up.
He does. He's in the charm, and the great thing about this is that Ataru actually put a cheat sheet in there. And this is actually something that does happen. Like people, because often within the charm there's like a little piece of paper or something, and people have been known to put a cheat sheet, especially for mathematics, in there. So they try and get it out during the test and stuff like that. But it's such an old trick that none of the teachers fall for it anymore.
Oh, yeah. One thing, not totally related to that, one thing that I noticed in the classroom for the first time is that Kosuke sits between Ataru and Lum in, like, the same row of desks. And I have to imagine that's because Onsen knew that if Ataru and Lum were sitting right next to each other, there would never be any studying going on in that classroom.
No.
Not even as much as already going on, which is very little.
Very, very little. And it also puts, like, Ataru and Kosuke next to each other as well. And he features a bit more in this, and you see some more of the interactions between Ataru and Kosuke, which I just... I'm a big Kosuke fan, and he really does come through in this a bit more. Like, you see, they are best friends, but he also has absolutely no trust in Ataru whatsoever.
Yeah. I think Kosuke really develops a lot more as a character, too, and in his relationship to Ataru. We did see a lot of him in a previous one where, they had the double date at the amusement park, but I think that as the series has shifted more into the classroom, Kosuke's prominence has only increased.
That's right. And in this chapter, basically, the god of knowledge comes out to try and help him, but he's not actually very helpful, of course, because no character in this is.
Yeah.
They start arguing, and the other characters notice that there's something up, and he tries to go around and copy things, but of course he copies Lum, who just draws on her test paper. She doesn't care about school. She just doesn't, she's an alien who doesn't only go to school because Ataru is there. So of course she's not going to care about tests and stuff like that.
Yeah. So the god notices her just scribbling random doodles and thinks, oh, is that modern Japanese? And then draws an Ataru's test paper and is like, golly, modern Japanese is complicated. I do like the runner that because this god is so old, he just doesn't understand stuff that would be like on a modern Japanese high schooler's test, like translating
English.
English, yeah. He's like, yo, is this code? I don't know code. It's interesting that it seems selectively people can see the god, because Kosuke and Mendou notice him, but it doesn't seem like other characters do. Like when he's like flying through the classroom, no one is paying him any mind. Even like when he's like right next to Lum and on her desk and on her test paper. So it's very interesting.
I think a lot of people just kind of learn to live with all the wackiness that's going on, and they just go, it's another wacky Lum thing, or it's another wacky Ataru thing, whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, he's like
does get a win at the end of this. He does actually like get to take the tests over because it just looked like he was having a really weird day.
I don't know if that's necessarily a win for Ataru, because he has to take the test again. He still has to take the test.
Well, yeah, otherwise he'd fail and have to do the grade again, so it's kind of a win. It's a win for him. It's a win for
the teachers, because if he passes the test, they don't have to deal with him for another year, and that's why they give him a redo.
The next one is the Sun Goddess Banquet, where actual gods descend. This is based on a legend where...
Yeah. The legend of Amano Wato.
Yeah. All the gods go to Izumo province, and there are no gods or Buddhas for the rest of Japan. So it's like a day off for the gods, but that kind of means that anything can happen anywhere at any time, because there's kind of nobody taking care of the humans as well. And then, of course, the real goddess shows up.
Yeah.
And she's very bright. She's the god of light. And of course she has a light bulb on her head. Yeah.
She starts off with a 15-watt light bulb, and then after getting annoyed by Lum, she switches it out for a 500-kilowatt light bulb and blinds everyone.
And I just love that Lum just already has a pair of sunglasses on her person and just puts them on.
Same kind of sunglasses from earlier when they were spying on Kurama, when like Ataru was going to study from Kurama, I think. Or at least
that's right. She's wearing a similar outfit to them as well, I think.
Yeah, they were also similar to the glasses when later they kind of dress up as, I believe, Asuka's bodyguards. They have like a similar like sunglasses.
Yes. She does seem to have a style with those. So, of course, the rest of the gods show up, and I think in the original legend, the goddess of light goes into a cave, so everything is dark, and then they dance and she comes back out, and there's light again. In this one, they want to seal her off for good in her portable blow-up cave so they can keep partying.
Yeah, which is a great, funny twist, because, like, once she hears the party outside, she's like, oh, I want to come out. Like, people are having fun. But then when they see her peeking out, they're like, just shut the door back down so the party can continue. Yep. I think another thing I really love is that she has an inflatable cave, like a portable inflatable cave, that she has trouble blowing up at first. But then she goes in, and it even has an occupied open sign like a bathroom, which is really great. One other fun little thing that I want to point out is that during the judges for the parade, you'll notice you got Hanawa Sensei, you got the principal, you got Ansama there, but also the watermelon ghost is one of the judges for this parade, which is a really fun
nice little
cameo.
Reference.
Yeah,
so nice little throwback to a previous chapter. He's just kind of sitting around doing his thing.
I guess one other thing I want to mention is that the title page is a challenge to the reader, and this is something that Takahashi seems to be pulling a lot more of in this volume, is like fun little games for readers. We've got this, read this really fast in one breath challenge. We got like a game board in a later chapter. We got like a panel where you are tested to count like all the horns in it. Like, it's a fun little interaction with the audience that I really appreciate.
Yeah, I think Takahashi by this stage was onto a good thing, but also wanted to try and change it up and challenge and, try and do something different.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, later on she would have many, many, many other hits, But I think at this particular point in time, she was like, I can't really stop doing Urusei Yatsura, so I've just kind of got to make it fun for myself.
Yeah, I love this playfulness, especially with the audience. Do you want to see me try and read this all in one go?
You know what? I challenge you.
All right, let's see if I can do this in one breath.
Okay. Go.
The Legend of Wano Iwato. Angry at Susanoo, goddess servants of the sea, for running amok on the plane of high heaven, Amaterasu, goddess of the sun and the universe, hid in the Amano Iwato cave, and darkness fell upon the earth. Troubled, the other gods threw a great banquet outside the cave. When Musei, the goddess emerged, began to dance. Amaterasu peeks through the door to watch. Takarajiko, god of athleticism, seized the opportunity to pry open the door, and one more light returned to the earth.
Oh, very good.
I read that fast, but I think that
You did take a breath,
yeah.
But that's okay. I'm not going to fault you too much for that one. I probably won't do that because I'm not wearing my glasses.
But next, we've got a really great chapter. The
Great Off-Campus Snack Battle. And this is fantastic. In the anime, this is a pretty famous chapter or episode as well.
I actually just rewatched the anime version of this, and it's also a ton of fun. But this again, I think this is like one of those first chapters we're seeing like the students versus teachers conflict really in full swing, and we even get like the student disciplinary committee, basically the class traitors of the class.
Yeah, and of course Mendou is heading them up, and like you can. There's like a great panel where he's kind of half in shadow. And his eyes kind of glint when they're saying, oh yeah, we're going to sneak out and we're still going to go get our snacks. Mm-hmm. And of course, Mendou's reading a book and listening in because he's such a swot.
Yeah.
And it's a great chapter of them just trying to go and eat outside of the school. This is a very old concept because it did used to happen a lot more, but school rules say you're not allowed to leave campus when school is on, and that's enforced a lot more strictly now than it used to be, pretty much for this reason, actually. I once taught at a school that was right next to a 7-Eleven, and they used to place 2 teachers at the gate to make sure nobody snuck off to the convenience store at lunchtime or recess.
Hey, this is based in reality then. At least
it is very much so.
Reality. I'm sure no one's dressing up as a Maneki Neko and hiding on the top of the shelf to jump on a table and scare students in a cat costume. Oh, gosh.
So this is good just because it really does play up the teachers versus students. It's got just how dirty the teachers are willing to play.
Yeah.
And they can get away with anything because they basically say, it's okay, I'm a teacher. And even one of them gets arrested, which is pretty good.
Onsen gets arrested because a friendly neighborhood reporter points out that he's a weirdo dressed in a Maneki Neko costume. And then when they go to tank him, he says, haha, no need to tank me. I masquerade as a passing journalist, but the truth is, I rep the Tomobiki shopping district. And he's basically a Superman-like figure, but instead of an S, there's a TSD for Tomobiki shopping district on his chest. It's just a really funny Superman gag.
It is pretty good, and Superman would have been quite popular at the time too.
Oh yeah, I mean, Dr. Slump at the same time had, of course, Superman in his story.
And of course, he gets clocked the next panel over, even like he looks like a superhero, and then all the students run past him and like basically knock him into a storefront. Oh
yeah, a lot of people get run over in this chapter, including like a very old teacher that the other teachers think has passed away, even though he's saying, hey, I'm not dead yet, quit insisting on like that.
So this is a fantastic chapter and really does kind of start off the students versus teachers of Tomobiki High. And I think it also kind of shows how, like, Mendou is just this two-faced prick, basically. Like, all the male students already know it, and he's always willing to let the female students go. But because he's head of this, the morals committee, he always thinks so highly of himself. And that comes into play in a different chapter as well. Yeah. When, of course, he thinks, oh, yes, I'm head of this, but I won't betray the students because it's a pretty girl. Yeah, there's a very similar chapter later on with the tea shop that I really like. But to point out one of those gags in this chapter, he lets the girls go because, oh, I'm a defender of women, go right ahead. But I love the gag of
male students then cross-dressing to also be let go. And one of the other students in this morals committee alongside Mendou is like a very Megane-looking figure. I mean, he has glasses. His hairstyle is similar to Megane's, except it's a little more combed over, which is interesting. But he has like this thing is like, oh, girls, if you squeeze my hand, you can go. And so then Kosuke, turns out against him by shaking his hand when he cross-dresses, which is very funny.
I love that. Like, his personality is nothing like Megane, but the look is certainly there. And there is a particular person in Japanese high schools that has that look. And you would often find that sort of person on the morals committee.
Mm.
And these are a thing. Like, these morals committee, not a thing in Australia, because we have no morals. Like, schools are super not well organized in Australia. But my wife actually used to be part of the moral hygiene committee in high school, and she would have to stand at the gate and make sure everyone had a handkerchief and their skirt was the right length and all that sort of stuff. And I couldn't stop laughing at this.
Oh yeah.
There's just no way that would ever pass the mustard in Australia. These people would be beaten to an inch of their life if they tried to do something like that in this country.
Yeah. I don't think people look too kindly on teachers' pets.
No. Next, chapter 5.
And this is Copy the Day. This is the start of a string of Ran chapters that bring her back in a big way, to the point that the original Viz release of Volume 11 back in the 90s as a Return of Lum, Volume 8, they titled it Ron Attacks, probably in reference to the fact that there are a lot of Ron stories in this volume. She kind of comes back after quite a long absence in Volume 5, where she barely appeared. Now she's kind of back as part of the main cast more regularly.
Yeah, we should probably talk about all of these at once, because we're going to run too long if we do focus on every chapter too much. But it's almost like Takahashi just kind of remembered, oh yes, that's right, Ron exists. Let's use her again for a while.
Yeah.
She's a fun character. And so they reintroduce her, and she just runs with it for a while. And then probably gets bored with it and focuses on something else. Yeah, the first one's great because Ataru is duplicated. And he actually has a date with Shinobu.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that she's just using him to get a free movie watching experience out of it. But later on, she is actually kind of protective of Ataru when she encounters Lum, and she kind of shields Ataru from Lum. It's kind of interesting.
And it's a throwback to the earlier chapters when she was much more into him, and she does get over Ataru and indeed Mendou by the end of the series as well.
Mm.
But at the same time, there's still something there. There's still, they were friends and they were even dating for a while, so you still see flashes of the original Shinobu now and again, which I really like.
She's entertaining different options. In the first chapter we discussed about the La Potion Line Potion, there is a point where Ataru is flirting with Shinobu and saying, oh, you are the only person I've ever really loved. And she's like, oh, is that true? And it's she's kind of into the idea maybe that Ataru is in love with her. And then later we'll discuss the, Catch Me Love Ball chapter, but she is kind of into the idea of maybe hooking up with Tsubame, which is interesting.
She just goes, oh, it's destiny.
Yeah. You know what? I'm not going to fight it. This is a better option than Ataru.
Yeah. There are better options out there, I guess. So Ataru gets duplicated. One of the dupes goes on a date with Shinobu. But what I love is when Lum duplicates Ataru, the other Ataru ties up Lum and then unties his duplicate.
Yeah.
Which I think is fantastic that they just work together immediately right off the bat. They know the score, they know what's going on, they know it's another crazy Lum thing, so they automatically just, tie up Lum instead.
Yeah. That's really, really good. It's she unties the ropes of the duplicate, and the duplicate just immediately ties her. I also like how all the duplicates have, a little prime symbol on them.
Yeah, that's great.
It's just floating off top of their heads. You gotta wonder, is it made of hair? Is it just some weird symbol object? It's really
it's
funny.
a prime symbol, like in math.
And then Shinobu just goes with it. She's just like, I'm not asking more questions. Let's go to the movie. One other note I have about this chapter that I found interesting is that they use, like, a bit of slang for when Ron is acting, very brash and rude. Like, she's saying, yeah, and dimwit, and you're, and language like that. But that's only exclusive to this chapter in the translation. In the other chapters, when Ron is acting, like, in her brash, rude, angry self, she's not using, like, kind of slang like that. So
yeah,
I find that very interesting
because I think when you use words like that, often it's written as Kansai dialect or Kansai Ben.
Yeah.
So people from the Kansai region often have are more expressive with their words. They will say there will be much more connotation within their speech patterns. And so sometimes Kansai people to Kanto people, who are like people from Tokyo, Saitama, Chiba, Guma, they might seem more rude. So I think sometimes mangaka use that to their advantage and just say when people are angry or more expressive, they use kind of more of the Kansai Ben. But I'd have to actually go back and read the original Japanese to confirm whether that's what they meant in that particular case. But
yeah, I'd be interested because it is curious that this is a translation choice that really only applied to this chapter, not the chapters of the volume. I'm just wondering why that was. It was just like maybe not a consistent oversight. I really don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting. And the same person has been translating the whole thing from the start. So maybe they just did a direct translation of how she was talking in the original manga.
And I'm looking at the 90s translation and they don't use language like that. They don't have Ron talking like that at all. There's, like, no difference in how she talks when she's polite and when she is rude. This is very interesting.
I'd really have to read the original manga. I should just buy a set. I really should. Like, I have some of the original manga in Japanese. At one stage, I did have the whole set, but when I moved from Japan back to Australia, I didn't keep them. But it shouldn't be too hard to get them next time I'm back in Japan because used books are big business over there, especially used manga, like secondhand manga. So I should just bite the bullet and just get a whole set of this stuff. By the end of this chapter, of course, it's Looney Tunes style. There are lots of Atarus running around. They all get tricked and they're all chasing hot women. What happens to the dupes? Who knows? Doesn't matter. Chapter ends. Everything goes back to square one after this.
Oh, yeah. I like that towards the end, Ron has to hide in a trash can. That's really good. And at one point, Lum is run over by a stampede of the Atarus, too. So, a lot of great physical gags in this.
I just neutralize the original. These are like runs.
What? Like a bad
Run's
smell? What does she mean by neutralize?
The next one, Those Were the Days, PC.
Yeah.
This is like a little personal robot who tries to attach himself to Ataru to make him do bad things, so Lum will leave him, except that there is absolutely no difference to the way that the little bot controls Ataru and what Ataru was going to do anyway, which was go out and hit on chicks.
Well, actually, I think Ataru acts more polite with the personal controller on him. He's like, oh, nothing. He actually acts a little bit feminine, too, in his body language, which is interesting. Like,
he does.
Arguably, the personal controller makes him more of a genial person.
This thing looks like Cool Spot to me.
Yeah. I mean, in the anime version of this, I definitely remember this guy having kind of like more of a hard-boiled kind of voice. You know, he's supposed to be
kind of like a detective or like a yakuza or something like that, like kind of like a gangster.
Yeah, definitely. One of the interesting things is that this is one of the last chapters to actually be adapted in the original 195 episode run of the show. This is episode 193 of the anime. And here it is in volume 11. So this is like one of those chapters that they waited a long time to finally adapt. We actually earlier we mentioned the chapter with Amaterasu. That's the last episode of the show. So kind of interesting to see like these two chapters like a third of the way into the manga, but towards the end of the show in the anime.
Yeah, it's I think they obviously overtook the manga when they were doing, producing the anime after a while. And there was a lot, especially towards the end of the anime, where they had one concept and they had to stretch it out for an entire episode.
Mm-hmm.
There is one episode where Onsen Mark is thinking of retiring, and they have a 9-minute training montage of him. Like, it almost takes up half the entire episode of him training with Cherry, and there's like hardly any dialogue, and he's just trying to reach Nirvana. The next chapter is
Hornless. It's a cute little 10 chapter where 10 loses his horn. This is where we learn a really interesting about Oni biology, in that, you know, as the Oni characters grow, they lose their horns, kind of like deer, and then they grow back.
Yeah, they molt.
Yeah, they molt. And yeah, so 10 loses his horn in a scuffle with Ataru, and Ataru's trying to take advantage of 10 being powerless, because without his horn, he can't breathe fire, he can't fly. And so he's trying to attack 10 during this time, but Lum protects him by, you know, just carrying him around with her. Ron, however, sees a horn, like, leave from, you know, the window of the Moroboshi residence, and it's like, oh, is this Lum's horn? If Lum's without her horns, that means she's powerless and I can get my revenge on her. So there's a great misunderstanding there. And yeah, just a comedy of errors where, like, Ron gives, like, this little sticker thing to put on the spot where the horn is to help it grow back faster, allegedly, but actually what it does is it makes it grow as a cactus in the spot. So when she goes over to the Moroboshi house later and sees that Lum's horns are totally fine, she's like, whoa, what happened? Does Lum know? Was she onto me? And so she's totally spooked by how friendly Lum is and thinks that she's gonna try and poison her. And so totally suspicious of her whole the time. Meanwhile, 10 has a cactus growing out of him and gets picked on by Ataru until the cactus finally falls off. He gets his horn back, and Ataru gets what's coming to him.
Yeah, it's difficult to feel bad about 10 because he's just such a little prick all the time.
I don't know.
I kind of don't blame Ataru for taking his revenge, but this is an important chapter continuity-wise because it explains that Oni, when they lose their horns, they lose their powers. Mm-hmm. And this happens at the very end of Urusei Yatsura as well.
Yeah, that is true.
And Lum does lose her powers, and it happens in the 4th movie. And so it's important which was never part of the manga or anything like that to begin with. So it's important for both continuities. It's also important that we finally find out some other interesting facts about Oni, as you said, Oni biology. So it's also kind of like it could be like a growing up thing as well. Like their horns fall out, they don't have powers, but it eventually comes back. You know, there's, I'm sure the same thing happens when they're going through puberty, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just an interesting thing. And I really love finding out more about the Oni, just as a people or as a race. Mm-hmm. Because you find out so little because, you know, obviously Urusei Yatsura is about a parody of Japanese culture more than anything else. But the Oni are like a very strong, almost gangster-like people, or warlike people who go and try and take over other planets. But they still have this side of them which does make them vulnerable, or does make them very different to humans, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, it leads to some great story ideas. Actually, in the first volume, it was like the ribbons that Ataru gave Lum that made her unable to fly. But that's also interesting, like covering up the horns in that way also had an effect.
Yeah, so it kind of comes down to the one difference that Oni have between humans is that they have horns. Mm-hmm. And it seems to be the source of their power. Yeah. So if you seal that off, then the rest of it's sealed off as well.
Yeah. It's a really cool fact about them. One of the other things I want to mention about the chapter is that this also has the gag where when Ron finds the horn, like a bunch of other horned creatures are stampeding in this big panel, and Takashi challenges the reader to count how many horns are on the page. By my count, there are 63. But I don't
actually counted, of course he did.
Yeah, but I have to wonder, did Takashi want me to count the 2 panels before this one big panel that also have the horn in them from 10?
It actually says count on this page, not this panel.
And if that's the case, if it's like the full page, then it would be 65. But I also think it's really funny that during the stampede of animals, like somehow there's a narwhal stampeding? How is that thing like running? Is it swimming through the air? But also really funny is like there's this alien Santa Claus on a sled being pulled by reindeer. There's like this penguin with like this pig-looking creature on its back. There's
like a serpentine or something.
Yeah, there's a serpentine dragon, and then there's this weird alien rhino. In contrast to like a regular-looking rhino also there, or maybe it's supposed to be a dinosaur.
And there's Pinocchio up there as well.
Riding a camel. And a bear. A cute little bear,
and a snail and a rabbit, I almost said Usagi, which doesn't make any sense because they don't have horns. So it's an interesting challenge. You win nothing, but I think Takahashi just wanted to draw all these animals.
That's what I love also, that Takahashi will cram panels full of all these weird creatures and designs just to create this scene of chaos. It's just one of the things I absolutely love about Urusei Yatsura, is that the world is just so full of crazy creatures.
And interestingly, a narwhal doesn't have a horn. They're actually teeth rather than horns.
Oh my gosh.
So that could be a trick there, or it could just be a narwhal. So the next chapter is Studying Mayhem, which is basically it's free study time, study hall, which is just where there's a period where you're meant to stay in the classroom and study, and nobody ever studies during study hall.
No, of course not, especially not during this study session when Rei comes to visit. And this is a big deal because this is like Rei's introduction to like the full class of Tomobiki, including Mendou. And Kosuke, I think, also meeting Rei for the first time. Rei's introduction into this chapter is also fun because Ten's talking to him on a transmitter. It's a pun on, Ten's name is obviously, like the number 10, and Rei's
the number 10
name is in Japanese like 0. So it's like 10 to 0. And of course, Rei drops in.
Oh, channel Rei. And then they say Rei. Yeah, it really doesn't translate so well into English, which is why the notes at the back of this make more sense. But what I love about this is the way that Takahashi draws Rei when he's human so handsomely. And then often when she draws him as the tiger bull, she draws him almost sloppily. Like very kind of fat, not particularly detailed, with like kind of roundish eyes with just simple dots in the middle. So you've got this contrast between Rei being the big dumb tiger bull, and then when he goes back to human, he just kind of says, yes, face, and he's more handsome than Mendou. And she draws him super detailed. Yeah.
One of the great recurring gags in this is like, what makes the man? And Mendou is like, the face makes the man. Other classmates are like, the heart makes the man. And then when Mendou sees Rei's pretty face, he has kind of a shock. And then he regains his composure and says, no, it's money that makes the man. He's got to find something to laud it over Rei in order to regain his sense of superiority, which is very funny. I also really love the panel where, it's a very cartoony looking Rei holding like a mirror and like a pipe and just the text, just another pretty face.
I love that as well, because that's a very me panel, I think. It's just something that really connects me to that. And of course, Ran tries to feed him, and he thinks it's really good. And of course, Cherry pops up for absolutely no reason other than to like torment Ran.
Oh yeah, because Ran feeds, a handmade lunch that is very nice looking to Rei. He eats it very slowly, and that makes her feel good. But then Cherry pops up with just a box full of trash that he's just collected, really. Just some random stuff, not arranged very prettily at all. And Rei also pays it the same amount of care and attention.
I just love that. Cherry popping up for absolutely no reason is a running gag in Urusei Yatsura, especially the close-up. He'll just suddenly appear full on face and everyone just dives for cover. And at the end of this chapter, Ray goes home because he's hungry.
Yeah, after all
he just flies
did
off because he's hungry.
Was eat during this entire chapter, he just leaves because he's more hungry and there's more food to be eaten elsewhere.
So, chapter 9, there's a stray cat. There's a cat on the stairs. Not
oh, yeah, this is a big one. This is introducing another recurrent character. And that's Kotatsu Neko. Not really named as such in this chapter, but obviously the name comes from what happens in this chapter, where Ten encounters Kotatsu Neko just eating taiyaki out in the cold wind, invites him home. Kotatsu Neko sees a kotatsu that the Moribushi were planning to throw away, and is on the stairs, so he just starts sitting under the kotatsu on the stairs, and it prevents Ataru from coming down for dinner. They call Sakura and Cherry to try and get Kotatsu Neko out, and they learned his backstory that when he was alive, he was just like an alley cat. He went into people's homes to try and get under the kotatsu, and no one would let him, and so the implication is that he was left out in the cold to die in the streets alone. But he's resurrected as, this ghost cat, and now he's under kotatsu, and the big punchline is, this whole time while he's on the stairs, the kotatsu wasn't even plugged in! It wasn't even heated! So instead he moves into Ataru's room, which doesn't solve the fundamental problem for Ataru, because the cat is still around, and he sticks around.
He does. The ghost cat just kind of hangs out, and often with the principal, which you see later on in this volume as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting that we see Kotatsu Neko kind of integrated into the cast kind of pretty immediately there. And especially, his friendship with the principal is just a thing that kind of happens. He just shows up in the principal's office.
He shows up sometimes.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because Kotatsu Neko also kind of plays a pretty big role in the anime as well. If Lum is the breakout character of Urusei Yatsura, Kotatsu Neko is probably the mascot in some ways.
Yeah. Every Takahashi series has to have a cute animal mascot, and Kotatsu Neko definitely plays that bill, and I think that's kind of another reason that Kotatsu Neko sticks around. I kind of forget the aspect that he is supposed to be living in Ataru's room for a lot of the time, because later on in the series, he mostly hangs around the principal or Cherry, but yeah, in this volume, we definitely see him kind of stationed in Ataru's room for a couple chapters, which is really fun. In fact, in his second big appearance, they actually pointed out, yep, he's still here.
He's around. And this is one of those things where Lum kind of says, "Oh, you're trapped upstairs forever with me." And she gets this super creepy look on her face. And go, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you, darling." I go out the window and just zaps him.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of like a Misery-style enthusiasm of having someone confined in your room.
It really is, and whenever she's got that creepy look, you always see her fangs.
Yeah.
And, of course, at the end, Lum is just kind of going, she's disappointed that he wasn't trapped upstairs forever.
She just snaps her fingers in disappointment.
I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for that meddling monk sort of look from Scooby-Doo.
I guess one other note about Kotatsu Neko I want to bring up is that apparently when he was alive, he could talk. But in the present day, he doesn't really speak much. He's not a cat of many words. Though
no, he's not.
Definitely he says...
hangs around Tomobiki.
Yeah, though he does say a few lines here. At the end of this chapter, he says, "My Kotatsu," or maybe he's thinking that to himself, and then later, he does say, "Hey, I'm still here," in his second appearance, so... In the anime,
which is probably more of a
silent.
nod to the audience than anything else.
Yeah, it's probably just something as kind of visual signifier for the reader, whereas in anime, you would have to make that more, audible as something said, and definitely Kotatsu Neko does not really speak in the anime from my recollection.
No, never. I think he does make grunting sounds occasionally. So the next chapter 10, Pickled, is pretty important. Once again, it actually has to do with Oni biology.
Mm-hmm. That when they eat pickled plums, they get drunk.
Which is, it's fantastic. Have you actually ever had one of these before?
I haven't.
They are super sour. They're good. And we have some in the fridge right now, I think, actually.
Nice.
My wife likes to have them. They are very, very sour, soaked in vinegar and everything like that. And they are often, like, as it looks in the book, you put them in the center of rice in a bento, and it adds a bit of flavor. And they're like a plum, and it still has the seed in them, but because they've been soaked so long, they've kind of shrunk. And they are good to give to people who aren't familiar with them, just to see the expression they have on their face. And obviously, Takahashi took this one step further to say that this is how they get drunk. They are intoxicating to Oni. So Ten gets drunk first, and then, of course, starts breathing fire over everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean mostly Ataru. And then Lum gets drunk, takes off all her school clothes.
It's kind of strange how excited they all are,
around.
Considering that Lum normally just wears her bikini outside the classroom. But
and this is one of the things that kind of, like, this translation is good, but there was just a bit more flavor in the original one here. Shinobu here in this one says, "Oh, for crying out loud, what are you doing?" when she's taking off her clothes. But in the original 90s translation, she goes, "What are you guys getting so excited about?" She goes around like that anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually pointed out. And I love that little translation flair they had that they just kind of added in the 90s version.
Yeah, definitely a liberty, because they use boat balloons to express that sentiment, whereas in the original, it's two different characters, Shinobu and this random girl making comments, and the other girl is just saying Lum's acting funny. But yeah, I like that extra bit of, meta humor in the original translation.
It's kind of funny that Ten is a fun drunk and Lum is not a fun drunk.
Yeah, she's kind of a sad, erratic drunk. Like, she's an emotional drunk. She cries when she thinks Adaru cares more about him than her. Then she later tells him to drop dead. And then, like, a page later is saying, "Oh, darling, I'm so glad you're alive." All over the place.
And of course, this ends with Onsen Mark looking for alcohol because she's drunk, and Cherry actually had some. And so they're trying to force Mendou to dance naked, which is what he promised if he actually found alcohol. So you don't actually see him dance naked, but the last panel is the other boys trying to strip Mendou naked.
Yep, and that was the last panel of the last chapter. English manga readers would be able to read for 21 and a half years. Until now, with the next chapter.
So the graphic novels weren't the only way to get Urusei Yatsura back in the day. They also actually published 2 chapters in a time in comic book form. And I remember getting my hands on that last chapter, and I was like, "Oh, Urusei Yatsura, I'll pick that one up." And it actually had a note in there saying, "Oh, thank you so much for reading, but we're going to stop this translation now." And I was so disappointed.
It's so strange because this volume of the 90s version, it ends with a "to be continued" on the last page on this chapter. And it's like, no, they didn't continue it in this same translation team.
Not in that century.
Release. No. Yeah, literally the next century, 2 decades later, it would continue, but...
So the next chapter, Forget the Year Party. This is a reference to something that especially school children, sometimes office parties would happen as well, where kids would get together in December to celebrate the end of the year and try and forget all the bad stuff that happened, which in this case is a lot of bad stuff. Of course, Lum misinterprets this and creates a 4th-dimensional sort of men and women, almost looks like a bathing area where they go in and they forget who they are. They pick up costumes. They dress as particular characters. And they interact with each other as those characters. So there is Sherlock Holmes, who is Mendou. And there is Zenigata, who is a famous... So you might be familiar with the name Zenigata from Lupin, who was the detective. But Zenigata is a famous Japanese detective from a lot of novels. And he was also, which were later adapted into film and television and manga and all that sort of stuff. But that's where the name originated.
In a sense, you could consider him the Japanese Holmes, I guess, in terms of all the fiction about him.
It's very famous. It's basically their version of Sherlock Holmes. I have seen some of the movies. Japan, when they like a character, they'll run it into the ground, especially if it's not copyrighted. So this is an interesting and very kind of bizarre chapter. There are elephants in here. You know, they try and catch women bathing. Lum is a genie who grants wishes. The wishes go wrong because Ataru doesn't specify. And then, of course, they all exit at the end, and everyone's forgotten everything, including the forget party. So she plans to do it all over again.
Yeah. I love that. They literally forget that they threw the party, and so history is going to repeat itself.
I do like that in this volume that Ataru is just like, I know what's about to happen here. I want out. I want nothing to do with what's about to happen. So he tries to escape, but everyone pulls him in. Like, so Ataru has learnt that, like, Lum is just going to completely misunderstand, and everyone else just goes along with it. So Ataru is showing some smarts here. Mm-hmm. Chapter 12, A Strange New Year at the Mendou Estate. Now, this is a really bizarre chapter.
Yeah, and we're entering volume 12 here, too, so completely new volume. First time in English. But yeah, this is a chapter that really shows off how crazy the Mendou family is, which is interesting because this is just a few chapters predating Ryoko showing up. But yeah, I mean, basically they're all attending Mendou's house, and it's set up like a crazy trick house unbeknownst to them. And so they're just moving across these different rooms and being fed paralysis potions. They get put on conveyor belts that bring them back to the front to do the room again. It is really crazy.
It is bizarre. And even Mendou is surprised in this chapter. Like, he doesn't know what's going on either. And basically his family is just playing a trick on them. So, at the end of this chapter, it's revealed that basically this is a giant board game. The idea is to try and get to the finish line, like you would in Snakes and Ladders or something like that. Mm. And the reason for this joke might be a little bit lost in translation, but often on New Year's Day in Japan, it is a time to play games. So there are many different types of games. But like the Game of Life is a popular board game in Japan for whatever reason, because I hate that game.
Oh no, I played that a lot as a kid.
It's super popular over there. And there are traditional Japanese games which you can play. And this is why they're all dressed up in their kimonos, because it's New Year's.
Oh.
And the previous chapter was December, close to Christmas. So, of course, these are seasonal, like this is happening around that time of year. And when they get to the finish line, they're basically shut out of the mansion. And reading this chapter again, I super thought that Ryoko was going to be behind everything.
Yeah, because in the anime version, she is a part of it. This was another one of those chapters that was added very late into the anime's run, like in the 180s. So by that point, yeah, they rewrote it so that Ryoko was involved. But yeah, in this one, it's just the parents and the grandpa, who's like making shenanigans happen. I like that Mendou's dad says, "Oh, I'm doing something more interesting than golf."
So basically, yeah, they were just fucking with him the whole time, which I just think is fantastic. And the joke is revealed on the last page that it is a board game.
Yeah.
So you can actually play this game. There's like the start, the front entrance. You can cut out the playing pieces of Ten, Lum, Mendou, Shinobu, and Ataru. So you could actually play this game if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a fun time. I mean, I wouldn't want to cut up the actual page because it would, destroy the volume. But, you can photocopy it and then do it, which would be a ton of fun.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind playing this game, actually. Chapter 13, Tales of a Wandering Snowman. This is a bit of a weird chapter where a snowman comes from outer space. I assume. It's not really specified either way.
Yeah,
he just kind of falls from the sky.
It's just an alien snowman, it seems. But, Ataru protects him from being, melted by Ten's fire breath because the snowman kind of dropped right in on Ten and that made Ten mad. And so the snowman is like following Ataru around during the chapter, trying to pay him back, and Ataru is completely in disbelief that there is a moving snowman that is around, despite what Lum's saying, what the class is saying. Eventually, the snowman overhears Ataru, hoping that he could be haunted by a cute babe instead of a snowman. And so the snowman kind of creates this illusion of being a cute babe, but it's an illusion only for Ataru, because Lum and Ten just see the snowman and see the things that the snowman is like creating as illusions for Ataru, like the soup and the table and
the dancing rabbits.
Like the snowman is actually making snow rabbits, but but Ataru is imagining something completely different. And yeah, you're right. The chapter ends kind of in a strange way that I don't know how to feel about, because Ataru like kind of jumps the snowman as the girl, and then the snowman breaks the illusion, and then just ups and leaves.
Yeah, it's hinted that Ataru is inebriated by this stage. Like, he acts like he is. And it's all an illusion, but he's just basically like got hypothermia at this point.
Yeah, at the end, because he's literally been eating snow and he stayed out in the cold. Like, he took off his jacket because he thought it was warm because of the illusion, but it was still like snowing and really cold. So he's in bed sick in the last panel. But yeah, it's a weird note to end on because it feels kind of sad. Like, the snowman just wanted to repay Ataru for all this, but at the end, like, it's almost like Ataru kind of betrays the snowman by, like, really violating its personal space and trust by jumping it. So it's like, man, I don't know how to feel about that.
I mean, Ataru is a piece of shit, like, when you get down to it.
Yeah.
And he's not a character who should exist in modern times, especially. He's certainly a product of a particular time and space in manga history.
Yeah, I mean, here especially.
Yeah. I really like the snow bunnies here. So this is actually a pretty popular thing to do in Japan. Like, they make snowmen, of course, as well in Japan, yukidaruma. But they also make snow bunnies, which is kind of where you get a clump of snow and you stick 2 leaves in it and like 2 berries as eyes, and they look like little rabbits. And it's like a simple sort of snow sculpture you can make yourself, and my daughter loves doing that. And they look very cute, to the point where my wife takes them and puts them in the freezer to preserve them.
Yeah, that is really cool. I guess I have 2 little notes about this chapter that I do want to talk about. Is that I really like that this chapter has a lot of nighttime scenes with snow falling, and it looks really beautiful. Like, to do nighttime scenes is really hard, so you often see manga artists, especially weekly manga artists, try to avoid doing it. But also to add, like, inclement weather falling on top of that is difficult to portray, but I really love these snowfall scenes. They look really gorgeous. Takashi has great shapes for the snow, and I think it looks really well. And also, this is the chapter that shows that Kotatsu Neko is still in the room, and he says, like, I'm still here, in a, like, small speech.
Still around,
Yeah. So this is the chapter that cements that Kotatsu Neko is not just a one-off, he's sticking for the long haul.
I think sometimes, like, when you get a character like that that's super popular, even pre-internet days, people would write in and say, oh my god, I love this. Oh, this is so great. And the author would catch wind. Oh, hang on, people really connected to this character, so I suppose I'll keep using them. And I think that's what happened with Kotatsu Neko.
I believe
probably
it.
The fact that pretty easy to draw and pretty big, so, takes up a lot of background space.
Yeah. I believe it, especially since there was a couple chapters between his first appearance and this reappearance. So maybe readers really did respond well and wrote in that they want to see more, and Takashi decided to include him more.
So chapter 14, the coffee shop ban.
Yeah.
So I love the title page of this, where it just says, I don't have a role in this story. Like, Lum is just having some tea saying, I don't have a role in the story. She is still in it, and she does a couple of things, but she makes it a point to say, I'm not the main character in this. I don't really have much of a role other than trying to electrocute Ataru.
Yeah, she doesn't have much bearing on the plot. She appears in the first visit to the coffee shop, but not in the rest of the chapter, except for a great gag where she comes out of nowhere just to shock Ataru and says, hey, I had to do this because otherwise I would barely have a role in this chapter.
And I tweeted this out saying, well, yeah, good, because, it's Ataru's story, not, Urusei Yatsura is about Ataru. And the amount of people who came back and said, I wouldn't read if it wasn't for Lum, and stuff like that was really funny.
You aren't wrong, I guess. I mean, Lum is kind of the star character, even if she isn't the main character.
She's the breakout character, sure, but you wouldn't have Urusei Yatsura without... It wouldn't be funny without Ataru.
Oh, yeah, you need both characters. It's the dynamic between them that makes it what it is.
Exactly. That's what makes it, like when I first got into Urusei Yatsura, of course, as a 14-year-old boy, I was attracted to sexy alien in tiger skin bikini. But the more you read about Urusei Yatsura, the more you realize that it's not Lum's story, it's Ataru's story.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a new coffee shop opens. The students skip school to go hang out there. The teachers call a conference and decide that they are against it. What I love here is that Ataru almost gets murdered with a spear.
Yeah, he's spying on the teachers meeting, and Onsen Mark shoves his spears through the roof, and it grabs his shirt. He just barely missed it. So
yeah, he was seriously almost impaled there, which I think is a great gag. And just Onsen Mark's look on his face is very Looney Tunes as well, massive, massive teeth in his mouth, shouting intruder while he's trying to kill someone.
Mm-hmm.
Why does he have a spear? Of course he has a spear. He's Onsen Mark. There's a pretty girl, and Mendou is basically I support the ban, and then he sees the pretty girl and goes, no, I'm not going to sell my soul to the teachers.
Yeah, there's a good gag where there are two other people, the morals committee with Mendou, the two people we saw before in the previous chapter where they were visiting all the restaurants during lunchtime. And the glasses guy is saying, I don't care to, what doing this task of preventing the students from going to the coffee shop. And then the other kid is I'm against the ban. So only Mendou was in support of the ban, and then in the end no one was in support because Mendou also fell for the pretty daughter of the shop owner.
And it's I think the moral committee is basically your average committee of one in support, one opposed, and one abstained.
Yeah.
Which means you're not getting anywhere with this set of people.
Yeah.
Of course, at the end they decide to close down the coffee shop because the teachers keep interfering and basically chasing away other customers.
Yeah, I mean, more specifically, he has to close down the store because he thought that the students would come to visit the shop, and he's just getting tired of all the people from Tomobiki High, ruining his business and driving customers away. So he was going to throw roaches on them to, scare them off. But they decide not to go to the tea shop. And so instead, when the door opens, there are other customers who come in, and he throws the bucket of roaches at them. And that kind of ruins his business, and he has to shut the business down.
So the last panel is
him getting his revenge. Yeah.
Ordering all of this food and 911 calls. So ambulance drivers with stretchers come and food gets delivered and the police are there, all to harass the teachers.
Yeah. I feel
which
for
I think
this
is
guy.
great.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing here is that this is actually a page. A lot of these chapters start being a page shorter than what they normally are.
Interesting.
So the last page of this is just a picture of Azumi, who was the main love interest in this particular chapter, the cute girl. And this just kind of happens sometimes. There's just one page where they go one less page, and they just kind of have a splash page of a character instead.
Yeah, just like a breakup page.
So the next one is called Locker Inspections. And this really highlights, if you thought the war between students and teachers was bad before, it kind of hits a bit of an apex moment in this chapter.
I mean, it becomes a literal war.
Yeah. So Lum brings a new robot to school who is meant to carry her books.
At least
but he's a combat robot, but actually he's not a combat robot. He's like
a cheer robot. He just
cheers
robot,
on a combat
people.
Support robot.
Yeah, and so in this conflict between the students and teachers, the students think, oh, this guy's going to fight for us. We're totally going to win this battle with the teachers. But no, he just cheers them on and they lose.
The teachers actually win this one. Like, they do locker inspections and they confiscate a whole bunch of student property with the intent to bury it.
Mm-hmm.
This has an interesting cultural reference in here, and Urusei Yatsura is pretty timeless, but they actually mention or allude to Sony Walkmans.
Oh.
And Sony Walkmans were a massive thing back in the early 80s. They were created in the 70s and they took off really big. Everyone wanted a personal cassette player, and people would get part-time jobs and they would listen to music on the go because it was a lot harder to do back then. And teachers hated them. There is a lot of references to these in the early 80s because teachers hated the fact that students could listen to their personal music and not pay attention to class, and so they wanted them out of the classroom. And this even happened back in my day in the 80s and 90s as well, like personal... this is before mobile phones had MP3 players in them and everything like that. That they would be banned from school because people would be listening to them in class. And what some people would do is they would grow their hair long and use like tiny little earbuds to have them in so they could hide the earbuds and listen to their music during class and have like their Walkman kind of hidden under their shirt. So I just like that little reference to what was going on in schools at the time because these were a big problem. Obviously, Takahashi was aware of this.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, at the end of this chapter, the teachers actually win. They're going through all the student lockers. What they find in the lockers is hilarious because there's just like a whole bunch of like sporting equipment and games. And then you've just got a massive statue of a raccoon in there as well.
Yeah, Tanuki with a sunflower hat or something. Just a weird statue that someone saved.
And there is actually a student later on saying, "Oh man, I really wanted that. Like, I worked a part-time job so I could be able to afford that." And Mendou goes, "There's no accounting for taste, is there?" Like, the fact that a student would want that is pretty hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
Chapter 16, Alien Invasion.
Yeah, this is a pretty significant one.
Kind of focuses on Onsen Mark.
Yeah, like Lum's friends are all kind of congregating in the class to have a class reunion with her, and Onsen Mark is getting fed up with this. He just wants his class to go back normal, so he goes to the principal to come up with a plan to get the students back in line. The principal is kind of avoiding actually doing anything actionable and is like saying, "Oh, you used to get breakfast, huh? That's why you're short tempered. Why don't you eat breakfast?" And then he's like, "Oh, actually, I haven't eaten breakfast, So he's kind of annoying Onsen Mark with his like kind of comments there. And it basically culminates in them holding a staff meeting and then the class reunion at the same time in the conference room to Onsen Mark's chagrin.
This is funny because Onsen Mark seems to be the only one who is aware of how batshit crazy everything is around here.
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying to be proactive and he's trying to do something about it and he's just getting frustrated at everyone.
Yeah.
Like, his classroom is being invaded, the principal just is accepting of the entire situation and doesn't care, and Kotatsu Neko's there and he goes, "Oh yeah, there's a cat that sometimes visits." Cute, isn't he?
This is the first time we really get a sense of the principal's eccentric personality and his chill, kind of laid back kind of attitude towards things, which I really appreciate. He's such a little fun character and how odd he can be, especially later on when he holds all these weird competitions for the students to trials through. And here we see that he kind of immediately accepts that Kotatsu Neko's in his room and is, palling around with him. So we're kind of an instant friendship.
Principals in Japan are super interesting in some ways, in that although in our culture, like, principals of the school can often be like super scary, super authoritative people. Often the dynamic in Japan, and this isn't always true, but often it is the principal of the school is like an easygoing, kind of palling around, but, offers sage advice sort of guy. And the vice principal is the one that dishes out all of the actual discipline and corporal punishment.
I've seen that trope in a lot of manga and anime, so interesting.
And as someone who used to teach in several schools in Japan, I can say that this is true. Like, the principal is super laid back in all the schools I ever taught at, and I was friends with some of them. And I even went back to one of my schools even after I left to visit the students and the principal. And the principal was like, "Oh, you can come back anytime. This is your school. We loved you as a teacher." And the vice principals just stand there. "Yes, welcome back. It has been a while." And it's always that weird dynamic. And it's very, very true that when you get elevated to that position, you just kind of go, "Well, I'm as far in life as I'm going to get. May as well take it easy."
Oh, actually, one note I do want to mention that is important about the continuity of the series that this chapter introduces is that it does establish that Benten, Oyuki, and Lum are all part of the same class when they were in middle school as kids. They're childhood friends.
Yes, that's right.
Before we had known that Lum was friends with Benten and Oyuki individually, this is the first time that we've learned that Benten and Oyuki and Lum all know each other. Then they were all in the same class together. And even though Ron doesn't feature much in this chapter, in the last panel where the class reunion is being held, you actually do see Ron in the room. She's playing Mahjong with Kotatsu, Neko, and a bunch of other aliens. So this also does imply and establish that Ron is also a part of Lum's childhood class and also part of this friend group.
Which makes sense. And that dynamic, that foursome, is explored a lot more in later chapters, which is... it's super interesting because they've all got their separate personalities, and Benten is, of course, always the delinquent type.
Yeah.
And Ran is almost like the innocent bystander that kind of gets dragged along and gets into trouble with everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
But I love all the aliens here. The last panel with all of the different aliens, the snake-type aliens, like the alligator-type looking gangster people. It's fantastic. Must have been so much fun to draw.
Oh, yeah. Again, I love Takashi's crazy alien designs. Next, we got a Valentine's chapter.
We do. And this isn't the first Valentine's chapter, of course.
No, we talked about last time. We had that Valentine's chapter with that little girl in 10, which was really cute too. But this one is really interesting because, Ataru's going into Valentine's Day thinking he's going to get at least 3 chocolates. He's going to get from Shinobu, he's going to get from Ron, and of course he's going to get from Lum. Turns out that not getting from Shinobu did not get him a chocolate, and Ron isn't there. Ron's hanging out with Ray. And so he's expecting that he'll get something from Lum, but he's dropping hints. But Lum's saying, "Oh, I don't have any chocolate for you." That throws him for a shock. And then to rub it in further, later on, he notices that Lum does have chocolate, but instead of giving it to him, she gives it to Mendou. And so at the end of the chapter, Ataru's just crying in his room. While behind him, Lum is building a giant heart mural of chocolates to spell out, it's like in the shape of a heart, and it spells out "To Darling Lum." Just a super cute romantic gesture. And so the chapter ends just in a really sweet way, where we see that Lum really does care. He's got Ataru all these chocolates and doing something super fun and sweet to him. And Ataru's just sobbing, crying to sleep, blissfully unaware. But I like Kotatsu Neko has this cute little smile looking at him. So that's so cute.
It's an interesting chapter, and 10 is very perceptive at the end here, where she says, "Come on, Lum, like, Ataru's pride as a man depends on him getting chocolate in front of other people."
Yeah.
And I think that's actually really perceptive, because that's what Ataru wants. Like, he wants to look like he's loved and cool and all of that stuff in front of his classmates.
And he has to mentally kind of convince himself that, just because I'm not getting chocolates doesn't mean that the girls don't love me. Like, he tries to convince himself that Shinobu isn't giving her chocolate because Lum will attack her. So that
it's super interesting here, because in this translation it says Lum will kill, Shinobu says Lum will kill you. In the fan translation, it was Lum would kill me or lynch me or something like that.
Yeah. That's interesting, yeah.
And I don't know what the original Japanese is. I have to go look for it. And this is something I should probably start doing, is looking for the original Japanese to see what the original translation was. whether she says Lum will kill me or Lum will kill you, because it's kind of interesting. The way her face looks, it kind of does look like Lum would hurt me or lynch me or kill me or zap me or something like that. But she's saying Lum will kill you, which is kind of showing concern for Ataru.
Yeah, and the way it plays out here makes me feel like it would have been kill you in the original, just because of Ataru's dialogue saying, don't worry about what Lum will do to me. If you care about me, give me some chocolate. And so then Ataru resigns himself to thinking, her not giving me chocolate because she's worried about me is also an expression of love. I can be fine with that. It's okay. She cares about me.
And this is also another chapter that there is no last page, or the chapter is one page shorter than the other ones. It's got a splash page of Lum and Ten at the end, of Lum in her school uniform.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether that was a choice on Takahashi's part, that she just didn't need a page, or she was restricted to that many pages for this issue. But it's interesting to see that they're not all the same length.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is one of your favorites,
Yeah, actually, one other thing I do want to mention about this chapter is that there's this scene where Ataru is talking with Sakura, really sad that Lum seemingly is ignoring him and has forgotten to give him any chocolate. This scene is repurposed in an episode of the anime, which is otherwise anime original. Episode 66, Happy Birthday, My Darling. This scene with Sakura is in that episode, yes. But the context is completely different, of Lum forgetting Ataru's birthday and him being kind of sad about that instead. So it's kind of interesting. They borrowed an element of the chapter, a scene for that episode, but otherwise the rest of the chapter wasn't fully adapted.
Which is interesting as well, because in this chapter, Sakura has no idea what Valentine's Day is. She doesn't understand any of the significance whatsoever. But she does actually say to Ataru that she is a counselor and she is there to talk if he wants to.
Yeah.
And of course, Ataru immediately tries to take advantage and tries to jump her.
Mm-hmm.
The next chapter, 18, Deadly Peril in the Classroom, which I think you've mentioned a couple of times already, is Ten trying to discern what a makeup class is. Everyone's ignoring him, and they throw snowballs at him after he tries to breathe fire on them. And then so Ten decides to get his revenge, but everyone in the class is told to be absolutely quiet no matter what. Otherwise, they have to take a class over the break. And this is another one where Onsen Mark is just flummoxed by the staff, by the students. And they will not say anything no matter what kind of ordnance are thrown at them, or how many people are burnt, or possibly even killed.
Mm-hmm.
They refuse to talk because they don't want to go to school on their break.
Eventually, he is won over by their conviction and is deeply moved. But that's when he's like, okay, I'm going to do my best to teach this class because you guys are trying so hard. And then he steps in the landmine. And then the class ends right as they're trying to get back to the lesson. And they all collapse.
I like how they always say, don't talk. Like, they write to each other because they think that Onsen Mark is definitely trying to trick them.
Yeah.
In this case, he probably isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But I just love the fact that they are so suspicious of him. And they just know that if they do accidentally talk, then he would totally get them up for that.
Mm.
I just think is super clever. So there's most of the dialogue in this is mostly from Ten.
Yeah.
Which makes it, again, very Looney Tunes-esque. Sort of, the drawings speak for themselves.
Yeah, there are a lot of great visual gags, like when Ten throws the grenade and people are just swatting it back with their books until it hits the back of the class, but it misses the trash can before it explodes, which is really great.
Onsen Mark's eyes pop out several times in this chapter, which I love it when Takahashi does this.
Oh yeah, there's some great wild takes.
Like, big, just eyes popping out of their sockets when they see something, super crazy happen.
Mm-hmm.
The next chapter, Mendou's siblings.
Yeah, we get a trio of chapters introducing Mendou's sister Ryoko, very theatrical character, kind of signified by the fact that her assistants are all kuroko, like stagehands in Japanese theater, kind of hinting at that aspect, and that kind of motif plays into what she convinces Ataru to do, as in play a kind of a Romeo and Juliet-esque star-crossed couple. kind of thing, which I think is played up a little bit more in the anime version of this, the specific Shakespearean allusions in the back half of the story in the second part. But yeah, she's a really fun character and how kind of manipulative she is and how much of a prankster she is.
I do love that she's got that that prankster element about her, because you can tell she's related to Mendou, and you can tell that she's just doing all this because she's bored. She has no interest in Ataru whatsoever. And she knows that she can play Ataru like a fiddle. But he goes along with it all the way. I could have sworn that this chapter where Ryoko is introduced was in the original run of the comics by Viz.
Interesting. They may have published some chapters out of order, and perhaps they just did not collect some of the chapters they did translate into graphic novels. So
it's possible. I don't, because I've read this basically 3 different times, it's very difficult to tell my memories apart, but I really remember her appearing quite earlier in the original translation, but once again, I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, she comes to deliver
Mendou's lunch
to Mendou
3 days late.
Oxen.
Yeah, because she was traveling by oxen, so it took her 3 days to get there. She started on Monday, she came on Wednesday, and of course, the lunch is all rotted in that time. But Ataru eats it anyway, even though
because he's Ataru with a stomach of iron.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interesting dynamic because Mendou knows what his sister is. And he wants, despite the fact that he doesn't get along with her, he wants nothing. He wants her to have nothing to do with Ataru.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
of course.
Mendou just hates Ataru in general, so the thought of him being with his sister, even though his sister is such a pest to him, he's still not up for that. And neither is his dad once Mendou explains that he's a worse womanizer than even he is.
I love the expression on his face in that. But this is interesting because Mendou's claustrophobia is also exhibited to the rest of the class for the first time in this.
Yeah.
In this chapter as well. So the rest of the class know that he has a fear of the dark and a fear of enclosed spaces.
Yeah, actually Shinobu found this out earlier in this volume in the chapter where they visit the Mendou house and Mendou's dad trapped him in the room alone. Because he first traps him and Shinobu in the room together and Mendou doesn't freak out. And then he pulls Shinobu out and traps Mendou back in it again and Mendou freaks out. So Shinobu sees firsthand, when Mendou is alone, he has this claustrophobia. He's afraid of confined spaces.
I love how vain he is that if a woman is there, he won't show any fear whatsoever because he's that self-centric.
Yeah.
But you do later on in the series find out why he has a fear of the dark and claustrophobia.
Oh yeah.
And it's basically his own fault due to time travel.
Self-inflicted trauma.
So the next chapter is fantastic. It's Mendou Siblings Part 2. This is where you find out that you kind of see his mum and dad for the first time. His mum is completely silent. His dad looks like him, but older with a mustache and smokes a pipe.
Well, we actually saw them earlier. Again, they visited the Mendou house, but actually his mom showed up even earlier than that in the chapter where they had the Parents' Day, and she got in that scuffle with Lum's mom and stuff. So we've seen them before.
Yeah, that's right. We have, yeah. I think it's the Mendou family all interacting with each other.
Yeah.
Is what I like here. Him with a mustache smoking a pipe is such a CEO Boss Coffee thing to do. If you've ever seen a Boss Coffee can of Japanese coffee, it is like a guy, like a middle-aged man with a mustache looking important. And They talk up about how dangerous Ataru is and how they've got everything ready, and he just walks in the door.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've seen him before, he just kind of walks in and goes, good evening, and just walks in.
Yeah, the guards recognize him, so they let him in, which is funny.
So, of course, the militia, the personal militia is mobilized against Ataru, filled with tanks. Lum is there, who has basically fed off
the electric fence.
The electrified fence.
And she is really enjoying it. She says yum while given kind of a flexing pose, which is really funny.
So whenever you see something like this, It's the Peko-chan face, with Lum with her eyes closed with a tongue at the corner of her mouth. That's the Peko-chan.
Yeah, that pops up a few times in this volume, too, which is really fun.
It does. It's a cultural reference there. The tanks are immobilized against Ataru. All of the guards are idiots, and the Kuroko, who are Ryoko's personal guard, help him as much as they can, which makes sense because they're stagehands, and this is meant to be Romeo and Juliet. And of course, he does make it up the tower. Ryoko helps, and at the very last minute before they're about to embrace, Lum catches him, and she's still electrified from feeding off the electricity, and basically zaps him half to death.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic chapter that Ryoko is just playing up the entire time.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 21, Hello Sailor Suits.
Yep, continuing off the Ryoko chapters, this time Ryoko is plotting and hypnotizing Ataru, seemingly. And Mendou and Lum and the rest are trying to figure out what's happened with Ataru because he's come to class all tired out and exhausted. And so they're wondering, what is Ryoko doing with him? And they find out the truth at her private school, seeing that he's basically acting out as Ryoko's dog for her class, as a kind of a test monkey for her hypnotism skills. And then the big reveal is that actually she never had hypnotism powers. Ataru was just doing it of his own free will.
He was basically chasing girls around and biting at their skirts and pretending to be a dog so he could hang around them. Which is just, it's such an Ataru thing to do. The other gag by 3 in this one is when Lum has Ataru on a leash, effectively calling him a dog, and he gets kidnapped anyway. And then he has him strung up like a monkey, like around the shoulders, and he goes, "What am I, a monkey?" And then the next time, he's actually got like a harness, like a horse, and he goes, "I'm not a horse," and he still gets kidnapped anyway each time, which I think is a fantastic visual gag.
And then at the end, he's punished by sitting in the corner, reflecting on his behavior, also kind of collared up like a dog to a post for his tardiness.
Ataru is very dog-like, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that aspect about this.
Yeah.
And, like, even Ryoko at the end of this chapter who is usually the prankster, realized that she was being tricked.
Yeah.
And when they all realize that Ataru is just biting at their skirt because he's a massive pervert, well, they all start freaking out.
Yeah, I mean, Ryoko wants to be the manipulator. She wants to be the one in control, the one playing the jokes on people. But here, she's like, oh no, I was the one who was tricked. Which is really great. It's something very rare to see Ryoko kind of one-up like that. So
it's true. And I think it's good that Ataru does get the one-up sometimes. Like, he's such a lovable loser character. But sometimes, you know, he out-manipulates anyone by being the loser.
Yeah. Once again, it's at his expense.
The last chapter, A Gift from 10, chapter 22, is 10 has a love catch ball, which basically shows people who they are meant to marry.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting group of characters hanging out with each other, Lum, Ron, Shinobu, and Sakura. Like, up to this point, you wouldn't really call these characters friends. So it is kind of strange that they're all hanging out. But it does lead to a really funny scenario where they all basically see, you know, the others' crushes as their own potential future suitor. Lum sees Rei, Ron sees Ataru, Shinobu sees Sabame, and Sakura sees both Ataru and Mendou. The big twist is the love catch ball is defective, and it actually shows who people would be most unhappy to marry. Or actually, it was like a completely different product in general. It was like a trick ball, a trouble catch ball. So, misunderstandings happen, and it's very awkward as people are trying to avoid talking about who they saw, because neither Ron or Lum want to make each other mad, and Shinobu is actually asking questions to Sakura about her relationship with Sabami, and like kind of interested in the idea. Meanwhile, Sakura is completely disgusted and worried about the idea of ending up with both Mendou and Ataru. I will say that I think she's very close-minded about, I guess, polyamory, but still, I don't think that would be a great relationship between the three of them.
No, it wouldn't. And I love the fact that Ataru is spying on them, and then Mendou joins Ataru to spy on them, and then Tsubame is also just kind of turns up and they go, hello, hi.
They're all peeking in from the window. I can't believe none of the characters inside noticed them. Because, like, in the very first panel of the chapter, we see everyone seated around the table, and you see Ataru with his face pressed against the window. It's so good.
I do love this. I love that, like, Shinobu is kind of open to the fact that Tsubame might be her destiny. Mm-hmm. So she's like going, can't fight fate, may as well find out more about him.
Yeah.
And he's like going, I don't understand anything that's going on with you people. What is happening? Right
up to the very end of the chapter, I don't think Tsubame understands what the heck is going on.
It's interesting because Tsubame is this kind of, he looks cool when you first meet him, but he's just as much of an idiot as everyone else.
Yeah, he's a pretty dorky guy, really. He's kind of...
He is.
Never
you know why Sakura loves him, but at the same time, he's pretty dull, pretty dim.
Yeah. I mean, he's pretty good looking, he's pretty kind, but yeah, not the brightest tool in the shed.
So it was as we said before, it's a very good volume 6.
Yeah.
It really focuses on a shift towards the classroom, where a lot of this stuff tends to happen, because I think this is where people congregate. Takahashi was having more fun with the characters like the teachers, especially with Onsen Mark and the war that they have to wage on the students of Tomobiki High, but also 2-4, which class they're in. Which is also interesting because 2-4 in Japanese is a reoccurring theme in Urusei Yatsura as well, because when Ataru always has the number 4 when he's in his athletic uniform to go after Lum, because 4 is an unlucky number in Japanese, because it's she, sometimes, or more often it's yon, but the original is she, which can also mean death.
Mm.
So them being in class 2-4 is not an accident. It's very purposeful.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say that Onsen Mark is an interesting character because he's the only one who can control that class to any small degree.
I mean, you need to have someone as stubborn as the students in order to keep those guys in line.
It's interesting again that Onsen Mark's name hasn't been called out yet. He hasn't been named. And I'm kind of disappointed because of all the translation that's happened so far where they call him Hot Spring Symbol or whatever it was.
Yeah, I am getting interested in when he's actually going to be addressed by name, because for as big as a character as he's been, he has not been addressed by name. You know, actually, I do want to point out, I noticed another recurring teacher character that popped up during this volume that also I don't think is ever named, but he's also another character like Onsen Mark that has like symbols on his coat. He wears like a black coat with I think a thunder symbol on his shirt.
I know the character, but he doesn't make a whole bunch of appearances.
No.
Like he's kind of around.
Yeah, just in like the big chaos chapters where it's teachers or students. Yeah, he has a Raijin symbol on his shirt. So, yeah, that's interesting. It's a short-lived minor character, but I noticed him pop up a few times in here.
I do love the fact when they're all fighting, like they're physically fighting with the teachers. It's not like an innocent sort of like banter back and forth. They're physically trying to beat the crap out of each other.
Oh yeah, it's a rumble.
And I love that. So I guess Volume 6 does kind of stay with us, and this sort of new theme of everything happens around the school because that's where all the characters are kind of continues on for Urusei Yatsura for a while. In this particular form.
I mean, I think the series has really hit its stride at this point, and I think this was one of the funniest collections of the series yet. I mean, I had so many big laughs reading this volume, and Like, this is the Yours Yatsura I really love, the kind of stories I really love, that just sheer utter chaos. All the characters have really been established at this point, the dynamics are set in stone. Like, we are just rolling with some great stories now. So I'm so excited to be at this point.
And there are still a couple of characters who still need to turn up to kind of make the cast complete.
Yeah, we have a big one,
so to speak,
that I think we'll finally get in Volume 8 this year. So I'm looking forward to her.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Yeah, it's I really like this stuff, because after you get over the fact that Lum is a pretty alien girl who's in love with someone, you can't keep that particular story going forever. And so Takahashi really branched out to other characters, other scenarios, and really kind of filled the universe. It wasn't just like will they, won't they sort of romance comedy anymore. It was more to do with the wackiness and the setting that kind of happens around Tomobiki High.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose we should move on to... We've already gone for an hour and 40 minutes.
But yeah, we should get into our other topic about collecting cells.
Yeah, so animation cells, I'll just do a brief summary on what they are. In the time before computers, we used to have to do it on cellulite, or God, brain's failing me. Basically, big plastic sheets. You draw the outline over the top, and then you paint it behind. And you would have to do this for many times just to make 1 second of animation.
Oh yeah, 24 frames per second.
Yep, and that's how it's been going. Basically, that's how it started, and that's how it was going until the early 21st century. So what would happen at the end of a production is that you would have boxes and boxes and boxes of the celluloid. All of these drawings that basically made up the animation. So there are some people who kept theirs, but more often than not, they were a waste of space because everything had already been recorded, and we don't need to store them anymore. So animation cell collecting has been a thing in Japan for quite a while. One of the more famous animation cell stories in the West was that when Disneyland opened in 1955, one of the things that they gave out to the people who were entering the park was cells from the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So they would actually hand these out, but people didn't know what they were. So the first animated feature-length film of all time, they were handing out all of these original production cells. People didn't know what they were and just threw them in the trash.
Oh,
so
boy.
It is actually super difficult to get and super expensive to get any cells from that original production now. And there are stories of in the Disney production offices of people scooting down the aisles or the hallways of Disney animation studio on the cells of Dumbo because they were so slippery underneath. So it kind of shows what people thought about these things after they'd already been committed to film.
Yeah, they did not realize they were holding art in their hands. And how valuable they would be to a huge collector's market.
Disney cells go for a lot of money online.
Oh, yeah.
They are very, very much collector's items. I don't own any Disney animation cells, but I think I'm not like a really big Disney fan. I think the only Disney property that I would want a cell from is from The Adventures of the Gummy Bears.
Oh, yeah.
Which was a
classic Disney afternoon show. I mean, kind of the real beginning of the Disney TV renaissance, even before DuckTales.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. It was the show that preceded DuckTales and was kind of their first hit. I love Gummy Bears, so that would probably be the one that I would want to sell from. However, they also go for massive amounts of money online. So I kind of got into cell collecting, not by accident, but after you start off in doing something like this, like, oh wow, I remember that. That looks really cool. I'm going to buy something. Like, oh, I've got a little piece of the show in my hands. It gets addictive. So I did start out by collecting Urusei Yatsura cells back when I was living in Japan. But I think the very first cell that I ever got was a Ranma cell.
Oh, nice.
And I got it off eBay, and I got it for like $20 or something.
Whoa.
And it was Ranma kind of like backing off from something with like a surprised look on his face.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and I had that for years, and I had it in a frame and everything like that, and I thought it was super cool because I was really into Ranma for a while as well. But when I got to Japan and I figured out, you can get cells here and how much they were and kind of the places that you could get them for cheaper versus the more expensive ones, I started to, oh wow, this is a Urusei-Yatsura, I'm going to get this one, I'm going to get this one, I'm going to get this one. And so I actually have amassed a rather large collection of cells now. Some of the other TV shows that I have cells from are Lupin.
Oh, nice.
I have 2 cells from Neon Genesis Evangelion, one of which is Misato, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I have a cell from Mahou Tsukai Tai, which was an OVA series. The Magic Users Club, I think it is in English.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Which I love that series. It's a bit ecchi, but I just have a fondness for it.
Mm.
Back to the Future, the animated series, I have a DeLorean of that. And I actually have one of Captain Planet.
Nice.
It's from Captain Planet, but it's of Kwame and Wheeler, I think it is.
Okay, cool.
And I have a plan.
A plan?
I shouldn't say the plan out loud, but I'm going to say it anyway, is that I want the guy who played Kwame was the same guy who played the guy with the visor from Star Trek the Next Generation. I can't remember the actor's name or the character's name. But he was the guy who was blind and had a visor over his face. And I want to get him to sign that cell and give it to my friend because he loves Star Trek The Next Generation, but he hates Captain Planet.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Those are going to do some mixed emotions. But that's awesome.
Yeah, that's exactly why I want to do it.
Can I ask, what the Lupin cells you have are? From which series?
I only have one Lupin cell. It's what you would classify as a pink jacket.
Oh, yeah, pink jacket.
So often people, when they talk about Lupin, will talk about the colour of his jacket from what series he's from, because his look doesn't really change other than the jacket colour he has.
Well, the style of that series is a little looser in terms of its animation, the shapes. It definitely does look a bit of a departure from the previous 2.
Yeah, that's true. I've been watching Lupin a lot more recently. Lupin is funny, but it's very much in the Inspector Gadget sort of very formulaic.
Oh, yeah. It's like a Scooby-Doo kind of formula, I would compare it to that, especially considering they make these yearly features, kind of like Scooby-Doo has these yearly features. It's a formula that you can really repurpose really well because the characters are so iconic and fun. There is some really interesting stuff done with Lupin in recent years with recent series that I think is really cool, though. Like Fujiko Mine and then the recent 2 new series for Blue Jacket.
I should really watch some of those. I've been going through... So I kind of skipped the first season and moved straight to the second season where things were kind of more stable and established.
I mean, Red Jacket is more iconic.
It's from the 70s, and there is a lot of very inappropriate stuff.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about Ataru and how his behavior has not aged great. Lupin also is the same kind of character who is engaging in a lot of sexual harassment and a lot of predatory behavior played as comedy.
Oh, yes. But also, there was an episode about Nazi Germany, and everyone was just doing the Hitler salute and Heil Hitler the whole time, and it was very deeply uncomfortable.
At least those they were the bad guys. They actually skipped playing that one on American TV. They dubbed it, but they did not play that on Adult Swim when they aired Red Jacket Lupin.
I didn't actually know that Lupin had played in America.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting.
Adult Swim aired, the first 26-ish episodes of Red Jacket, and they dubbed the first 78, the first half of Red Jacket. And then, over 15 years later, they've aired both Blue Jacket series, both Part 4 and Part 5.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So the cell I have from Lupin is a pink jacket. It's him leaping over a rock. But the cell I got good news, I got it for 100 yen, so $1.
That's really good.
Bad news was the cell was already damaged.
No
cells, the only way you can really damage a cell is if there is a cut in it, and of course it being plastic, the cut will just kind of rip through. The good news was that the rip was on the side of the cell, so basically I was able to cut it out to a postcard size and put it into a frame.
Hey, that's really good.
So I've been super interested in animation cell collecting because, as I said before, it's like owning a little piece of a show that you love. Like, it was used in the production, and you have, like, a piece of that. So, my favorite cell is one where Ataru is hugging Lum, and I got it, once again, very cheap. I just happened to come across it when I was in Nakano Broadway about 15 years ago. And it is from the episode where Ataru gets duplicated because he ate some manju that Cherry was trying to bury the world's evil.
Yeah, the first duplicate Ataru kind of story. That's in Volume 2.
So he's got his jacket open and he's got his red shirt underneath and he's like saying, I want to go back to Lum's planet. Mm-hmm. And so I've got this really good cell of Lum and Ataru hugging. And one of the reasons I love that cell is not only because Ataru and Lum are hugging, it's great, but also because that is the first videotape that I bought. The very first episode of Urusei Yatsura I think I ever saw was from a video I bought in Canberra back in 1996 or something like that, or 1995.
Whoa, that's really special that you were able to get a cell from that very episode.
Exactly, and it was just completely by coincidence. So there are a couple of ways to get cells. The first, which is probably the way that most foreigners would be able to get them, is from online auction sites. Of course, eBay is going to be more expensive, and the alternative is Yahoo Auction. So Yahoo is what they call it in Japan, is basically their version of eBay, because eBay never really took off there. And you have so many choices and so many interesting things that come up for sale on there. And there are a lot of animation cells, and they're usually cheaper to buy them there rather than on the foreign auction sites. But the downside is that you would need to, in addition to buying it, you would need to engage a company to basically, after they bid on the auction for you, they send it to that company and then they send it to you. So it's a kind of a roundabout way of doing things. I'm very fortunate in that I effectively have an address in Japan, which is my wife's address. So if I do get anything from Yahoo Auc, basically it just gets sent to this address in Japan in Guma, and then I just have to wait until the next time I go over there, which is usually once or twice a year. So I think the other ways are, if you are in Japan, there is a very famous anime chain store, effectively, called Mandarake. Have you heard of this before?
I haven't.
So Mandarake is basically a store that has lots and lots of Japanese pop culture. And they are kind of like a used bookstore, but they also have figures and toys and anime paraphernalia and manga paraphernalia and idol paraphernalia as well. And there are many of these stores all over Tokyo. There's a famous one in Shibuya, which is like down, it's like a basement store at the bottom of a building. And most of the shops in Nakano Broadway, which is a very famous place to get anime goods in Japan, most of the shops in there are Mandarake. So they do have a specialized store for cells in Nakano Broadway. And it's just basically you have to get lucky. So sometimes you will see stuff from Ghibli and from other famous series, and they're kind of priced according to demand. So you might see a cell of Lum, and it might be like $100 or the equivalent of, and you might see one of Mendou, and it's only like $10 because it doesn't have Lum in it. So one of the things about buying cells, I will say, is if you are after Urusei Yatsura cells without Lum in them, they are much, much cheaper.
Imagine.
So I have many cells of Ataru because you get them for like $10 to $15 because it's not Lum. I have quite a few of Lum as well, but a lot of those I just got very lucky with.
Mm.
Especially of her with her eyes open in her bikini. Those go for the highest amount of money.
Oh, yeah, I imagine. Oh, my gosh. I bet there isn't a whole lot of problems getting cells featuring cherry in them.
You know, interestingly enough, I only have one cell with cherry in it.
And what cell's that?
It is one where he's holding a bottle. I can't, and he's got a lump on his head. And it was a damaged cell as well that I got for like 100 yen. And I ended up cutting around it and putting it in a smaller frame. But there was one that had onsen mark and the principal in one frame, and it was 100 yen or 200 yen, and I didn't buy it.
Oh, why'd you pass on
And I
it?
feel stupid now because I was buying a whole bunch of other cells.
Mm-hmm.
So there is another store that specifically specializes in cells in Nakano Broadway called Apple Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
The guy, it's always the same guy. He speaks absolutely no English whatsoever. Everything in the store is in binders with the Japanese name on it. So you basically have to know a bit of Japanese to be able to go in there and look for the thing that you want, or at least be able to ask him. And they have about 3 binders full of Urusei Yatsura stuff. And it does change every time that I'm there. Of course, the Lum cells go for a very large amount of money. Shinobu cells also go for a pretty large amount of money. I think After Lum Run is probably the most popular one. Like, they're very, very sought after.
Yeah, I imagine all of the cells featuring the female characters in the series are probably pretty lucrative.
They are. Some of and he of course has ones that are in, like, behind glass cases. And last time we were there, he had the one where Lums was remembering Rei and Ran, and it was kind of drawn in a crayon style from the anime. And those were commanding $600 to $700, or the equivalent thereof, for each individual cell. Wow.
I mean, especially because that one is in such a different style. Yeah, I'd imagine that is a particularly special one.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine who will listen to this came very close to buying them. Unfortunately, that shop does not do credit cards. It's cash only, because a lot of Japan is still a cash-based society. Yeah, so I have gotten many things from this guy over the years. A lot of Urusei Yatsura cells, especially of some of the lesser characters, and a lot of Ataru cells. But this guy knows his stuff, and I've been going there for about 15 years, so he recognizes me. Every time I walk in, he goes, it's you again.
You're a regular.
I kind of am, at least for a few times once a year.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the interesting things, one thing that I should also mention about cell collecting is that there is what we call a keyframe or a genga. So the keyframe is on like a plain piece of white paper, or, 35 years later, brownish paper due to the age, where the original sketch of what is going to be put onto the cell is, and it will have notes on like what the color is. So it'll have the outline and color and maybe some notes about what is supposed to be happening or what's going to happen in the next cell. And so it is good if you can get a genga and a cell together, because having the genga means that you also have the original sketch from that scene as well. I have a genga from the very first episode of Urusei Yatsura where Lum electrocutes Ataru for the first time towards the end.
Wow.
But I don't have the cell, so I've only got the genga for that.
Still, that's a really great scene to have a genga of.
Yeah, it's one of my prized possessions, that one, actually. That's if my house is burning to the ground, I will grab that and I will grab the Lum hugging Ataru cell. And that's probably what I'd take out of the house. Everything else is replaceable, but these things to me are not.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some places you can buy cells. What I should say is that cell collecting has really arced up in the past decade or so. It is becoming much more popular, and they are becoming seen as pieces of art, and especially people want to collect something from a animated television show that they love. And to that end, you can kind of see the way price charting that these things have gone up. But more importantly, cells aren't made anymore. It's all done on computers. So these are objects of things that you just are going to only become rarer and rarer and rarer and rarer as time goes on. A good way of basically preserving your cells is to put them in a shadow box, which is like a frame that has space behind it, so you can kind of display the cell at the front, and then you can put the Genga or whatever background you want behind it and store it in a temperature-controlled, out of the sun, basically. Because at the end of the day, these are made of paint and marker, and they will degrade over time. So if you put it in a place where the back of the cell isn't touching anything, and out of the sun, they should last a lot longer. So I think that's probably my advice for collecting cells. If you are interested, if you see one you really like and it's a bit expensive and you go, should I, shouldn't I? My advice is jump on it.
Yeah.
Even if it is a little bit expensive. Over the years, I've amassed quite a collection. I've displayed a lot of them. And I think I've actually donated half of my collection. Just to members of Lum Squad and people that I've met over the years, because I was in a very fortunate position when I was living in Japan that I was able to come across so many of these great things, and I was able to just get them sometimes very cheaply, so I kind of wanted to share the love a little bit, I guess you could say.
Nice. How many cells do you think you've collected over the years, total?
Oh, in total, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I probably have over between 20 and 30 Urusei Yatsura cells.
Wow.
And I've probably donated about 10 of those. Between about 7 and 10, I've donated those to other people. The original person who started off the Daily Lum, a friend of mine called Erica, who's no longer on Twitter, I ended up donating to her like a really good one of Ataru and a really good one of Shinobu. As basically as a thank you for kind of getting all of this started. And I think very well deserved, especially in that particular case. But these, it's good just to see these things and to have a piece of the show and a piece of history to kind of display. And a lot of people I know are after the Holy Grail, which is a picture of Lum that has been done and signed by Rumiko Takahashi.
Whoa.
Unfortunately, there are a lot of forgeries out there.
Yeah. Gotta be wary of tricksters.
Yeah, they come up on Yahoo Ock a lot. They don't go for insane amounts of money, but they go for large amounts of money because they can't be verified. And Takahashi does do these. Like, she will, draw a quick picture of Lum, she will sign it, and she will give it to people occasionally. But if you can't verify it, it's very, very difficult. I think one of the few in the Western fandom community is in the hands of Matthew Sweet, who was a musician, I do believe.
Oh.
Who had Lum in one of his music videos in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
So I think he actually does own a signed picture of Lum. Much to the jealousy of the rest of the community. Mm-hmm. Do you own any animation cells yourself?
Unfortunately, I do not. I would love to collect cells myself one day, but sadly, I don't own any yet.
Is there any that you would particularly want from any series? Or,
oh, come on.
Or any particular episode from Urusei Yatsura?
Will want from any Rumiko Takahashi series. From Urusei Yatsura in particular, a scene from the episode with Nozomi episode 157, 157, I Love Darling Sincerity. You know, one of those scenes going to be amazing. A scene from, of course, episode 44, After You've Gone. That'd be amazing. You know, the iconic episodes, iconic scenes.
Those particular cells, they come up very, very rarely for 44 on Yahoo Walk, and they always command massive amounts of money.
Oh, I imagine.
Because I think that in the Japanese consciousness of Urusei Yatsura fans is still the favorite of all time.
Yeah, I bet they're in high demand because those are like the most iconic scenes and episodes.
I'm very fortunate in the fact that I have a Gengar of Nozomi from that episode.
Oh, yeah.
So it's actually like it's bigger than normal of her, and with a whole bunch of notes about what color her eyes should be. And it's got everything. It's got her eyes except her mouth.
Oh.
So obviously an establishing shot. So I'm very, very fortunate. And I got it for like 200 yen.
Wow, that's great.
Because they just didn't, they knew it was from Urusei Yatsura, but they didn't know particularly who the character was. So they went, not important, 200 yen, that's fine.
Oh, if only they knew. I think Nozomi's a fan favorite.
She definitely is. All right, well, I think that should take us to the end of Lum Squad.
Yeah, it was a good-sized episode this time. We had a lot to say about Volume 6 and a lot to say about cell collecting, and I'm sure we'll dive into more aspects of fandom and collecting in future episodes too. But yeah, there was a lot to say, and since these are monthly podcasts, it's worth getting them all out there.
We're not going to run out of content, that's for sure.
Oh, most definitely not. Especially since, and we forgot to mention it at the top of the show, but Discotek did announce last month that they have licensed the remaining Urusei Yatsura movies. All the ones that they didn't have yet. They had Beautiful Dreamer, and now they've got the rest of them, and they're all going to be coming to Blu-ray, and they'll be streaming, hopefully, later this year, most probably on Retro Crush, considering Retro Crush has Avatar, is basically Lum, despite them only having Beautiful Dreamer, so I'm sure they're hungry for some more Urusei Yatsura content.
It's very interesting the way that Beautiful Dreamer is often picked up, and nothing else is.
Yeah, I mean, Beautiful Dreamer is like the most iconic part of the franchise, I guess, for international audiences. I'm sure the attachment of Mamoroshi's name helps in that, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, we're getting the rest of the movies, and hopefully we'll get the series itself following. I mean, Discotek re-released Old City Hunter, and now Old City Hunter is streaming on Crunchyroll, literally every part of the City Hunter franchise. So if they can do that for City Hunter, I'm sure they can do that for Urusei Yatsura.
I'd be very interested to see if they would do a retranslation or try and buy the translation off Animigo.
Oh.
Because the Animigo translation is very, very, very good.
Yeah, I think they would try to, if it's at all possible. I think they would work with the head of Animigo to maybe get those subtitle tracks. But yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. I am at ProdTally on Twitter, and I do the Daily Lum. And how about you?
You can find me at LumRomiYasha on Twitter, LumRomiYasha on a variety of places like Amateur Revelation Analyst, wherever there's a LumRomiYasha, that's you can find me. You can also read my manga reviews on all-comic.com. We got a lot of books coming in and a lot of reviews going out, so look forward to more reviews on there. And you can also find my other podcast, Manga Mavericks, on there. And follow that at Manga Mavericks on Twitter, or at Manga_Mavericks on Twitter. And we're on every, podcast platform you can think of. And we're a podcast that explores manga to medium analysts and industry. And we've done a ton of great series retrospectives and interviews with people working in the industry. We recap the news, holding discussion topics, doing a lot of great stuff. So definitely check the show out if you're interested in the wide world of manga and what's out there. But also, if you
It's a very good show.
Thank you. And Lum Squad is now available on its own feed on a bunch of different podcast platforms of choice. Yeah, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Anchor. Tons of places now. We're getting listeners and getting subscribers. And yeah, look for Lum Squad in your podcatcher of choice, and it'll be there. And subscribe to us, rate and review us. We got some 5-star ratings already, which is really great. But yeah, leave us more ratings and reviews. That really helps the show gain visibility and get out there more. And if you have any questions for us, if you have any comments, suggestions for what you want to see us talk about and cover, you can send that our way on our email. lumsquadpod@gmail.com, or you can tweet them at us. We're at Lum-Squad on Twitter, so definitely follow us on there. And yeah.
Or just yell at me in the street, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, and
I'll answer your questions.
So I'm glad that we've got like the feed up and running on Twitter. You know where to find us, and we're excited to do the show more regularly again. And yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing to talk about more of your Seiyatsu. This is a really exciting time to be your Seiyatsu fan, a Rumiko Takahashi fan in general. Like I think I have some plans to talk about even more Takahashi stuff in the future because there's so much coming out. So yeah, keep posted, and thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you next time.
Matane!